Welcome back to the announcement of Kingdom Hearts 3.
That was announced literally years ago.
What?
First gameplay.
Oh, we got gameplay footage, bubbies.
Welcome back to Saeki House, your one-stop shop for a horror.
This isn't even horror this time.
It kind of, I would call it horror.
No.
Really?
No.
Fantasy? Dark fantasy, really dark fantasy.
It's what's the term for new fantasy? Like
Neo fantasy.
No, it's not. High fantasy.
High fantasy?
High fantasy is the term for like a combination of technology and magical.
Well, this isn't that at all, though. This is like historical realism. Okay, first of all, today we didn't do movies. We did films, a trilogy of films to be precise. Daiei Studios.
Shut up.
1966.
Stop.
1966 trilogy of films. Daimajin. Did I say from 1966? From 1966.
That's the third time.
All three of which were written by Tetsuro Yoshida, from the same company that produced Gamera, except this time around they put money.
Got it right.
Put money into it, which is nice. I guess you can call them. So, you could call them tokusatsu films. They meet the bare minimum requirement for kaiju film for me too. They aren't
kaiju.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily put it under the same umbrella as like Gamera or Godzilla, but I think a lot of the Majin stuff at the end of each film, like where the giant statue actually attacks people, they still use like all those same.
They use a lot of the same camera angles and techniques.
It's still a giant thing terrorizing people.
They use a lot of the same techniques that were established by previous films, and this is probably one of the first of its kind, right? Is Ultraman anything like that around the same era?
Ultra Q started, I want to say in like 63, but I might be... I mean, like, Tokusatsu, Eiji Tsuburaya had been doing what he'd been doing on Godzilla and Ultraman and everything for, like, several years before this.
Right.
So, I mean, like, the practice of Tokusatsu had definitely been around for a while. It was certainly established, but Daimajin...
Like Super Robot Red Baron?
Yeah. Which I was actually thinking about starting recently, because I finished Ultraman, so I want something else to watch. But Daimajin is unique in that it's really one of the more notable films from this era of Kaiju Iga films, beyond the original Godzilla, that takes it really seriously. Gets kind of dark with it.
Gamera is super serious.
It's not. It's really not.
It's a flying turtle.
Not until the 90s.
Yeah. Where they made Heisei.
Yeah, Heisei Gamera
ones.
Anyway, so Daimajin is about a stone. It's about a spirit that takes the earthly form of a giant stone statue called the Majin that everybody across Japan seems to know of, but they don't really know about it. And each film takes place with a different set of characters who are being terrorized by somebody wicked and evil. And at the end of each film, the Majin wakes up to punish those who deserve it and to save the innocents, and then he moves on. Is the general concept. The first film is directed by Kimiyoshi Yasuda. There, that's my intro.
Okay, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to the next one.
In the first film is cool because I think, unlike, these all take place in kind of that like Edo period Japan, like there's still samurais and shoguns and lords over each land, and like rifles are still new technology.
It's almost the not really a turn of the century. Yeah. I don't know when rifles were introduced, but it was the turn of an era of like warfare.
Yeah, sort of the end of that era in Japanese history. And I think the first film I think is the most samurai film like out of them all, because it actually deals with samurai.
Right. The second one kind of loses touch with that and becomes more of
about townspeople,
a relationship.
Yeah. And then the third film is about miners. Mostly. It's about
No,
the children of the miners.
It's not about the miners.
Yeah, it's about the miners of the miners.
But the first one is heavily involved with it pretty much doesn't even mention the giant god at the start, does it?
No, it does.
Like,
it opens with the horrible thunder sound coming from the mountains, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's the Majin." And that's the cool thing that I like about the first one especially. It does it well, but in all three of these, like, the Majin never shows up until like the final 10 minutes. Like, you see the statue, but he doesn't start moving until the very end of the film. But like, his presence is like constantly there. Like, they're always talking about him. They're always like referring to the Majin and talking about how he's gonna wake up at some point, or like how some unexplainable thing going on is because of the curse of the Majin and stuff like that. There's like this really dark mysticism that sort of surrounds all three of these that I think really, pushes it from kaiju film into, like what you said, high fantasy.
Nope.
No. What did you say it was?
I was joking about high fantasy.
Which one's high fantasy is like?
That's the technology.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Dark fantasy is the one where
fantasy.
it's taking elements of. Well, this isn't like the definition of dark fantasy, but this is taking elements of a non-fictional setting and applying very
it's
minor.
Taking fantasy elements and putting them into historical fiction.
Yeah, in historical fiction. Very minorly.
Yeah.
It's not like a bunch of yokais are attacking the village and they're trying to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like elves and things. It's just there is a god.
Yeah, I was gonna
And
mention
that's
that. Is it's like I can take the Majin so seriously as like a movie monster because there's nothing else to compare it to.
No.
There's no. I mean, they talk about ghosts and stuff, but there are none to be seen. And like the Majin is really the only fantasy element that ever has any sort of draw on the plot. So it's like it's the only thing that's really out of place in this universe.
Right, and I think that's what the first movie does so well, is that it primarily is about two feuding factions, one of noble samurai and subjugated villagers to cruel and unjust warlord. Is he a warlord?
He was like a former general to the warlord that then formed a coup and took over.
So
and enslaved the villagers. And
a good amount of the first movie is just those two factions fighting it out, trying to.
Yeah. Well, you have the escaped prince and princess and their bodyguard who have been living in the woods and getting info through the town's high priestess. And so it's like they're just waiting for the right time to swoop in and take the Lord's seat back and return this town to its former glory. But first, they need the help of the Majin to squash some baddies.
Right, and throughout the movie, you think that the Majin is actually meant to help, meant to be good.
Well, they talk about they talk to the villain about how. I mean, the villain is like a total agnostic, like, I don't believe in gods or spirits or anything, but they're constantly telling him, they're like, oh, the Majin's gonna wake up and fucking get you. But it's, like, they know that the Majin is there to punish the wicked, but everybody seems to be afraid of him anyway, because it's like this weird force out there. Like, he is dangerous.
He is dangerous, but I'm saying in the way that they believe that he's aiding them to aid them rather than to maintain balance.
Yeah.
Which is what is the true order of this godlike figure.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't really care about doing something good and more about maintaining the status quo.
Yeah, it's more about punishing those who deserve it than saving those who are in trouble.
Right.
So it's kind of like this. He's literally like a monolith of judgment. Like, he doesn't care about who's innocent as much as he cares about the villains getting what they deserve.
It's funnily like I'm playing Mass Effect 2 right now. But a character in it, Samara, she is a Justicar, and in the Sari culture, she lives by a strict code where she only dispenses justice. So if anyone is deemed unjust, she has the full right to kill them, even if they just get in the way of it.
Yeah,
so, like,
I mean, that sounds similar enough.
Yeah,
it's a really old idea of a god. Like, you read up on, like, really any polytheistic religion or spirituality, and it's like there's usually like a figure who is not the high god of whatever realm you believe in, but it's like it's there to pass judgment on people. And it's like, and again, I think that kind of adds to the realism of these movies, is that it pulls from what sounds like actual religion for the most part,
right?
Because it's not a super out there idea.
I don't know much about gods and
I don't either, but
in Japanese culture.
Yeah,
I know about monsters, but not
I've
gods.
read plenty up on spirits and yokai, but gods themselves, I'm kind of like,
yeah, I don't know.
That's sort of a gray area for
much
me.
of anything of like Shinto religion at all.
I used to. I read a lot
Amaterasu.
I read a lot about it in high school, but I kind of forgot and everything. But I don't know what this doesn't really. Daimajin doesn't really assign itself to any one belief system because, again, like, at the end of the day, it's just like a fantasy film.
Right.
It's all made up. It doesn't. It might pull ideas from certain, parts of Japanese culture, but at the end, it's like it's an original character, I believe. Yeah. Pretty sure.
I haven't heard anything.
I haven't either.
Of this ilk, so can't really say. But that's the baseline story of the first movie. It's two feuding factions. One is deemed unjust and cruel and evil, so the other party seeks to...
They're the innocents who have been shafted.
Who's been shafted, yeah. Shafted hard.
They've been fucked over.
So they hope that the god of the land will redeem the land. I don't know. Maintain...
Just
restore the natural order that is supposed to be in the land.
Well, that's the thing.
It's not really natural. They're people, so I don't know.
Well, it's like, would the Majin have ever... I mean, like the protagonists pray to the Majin to get it to wake up, but would he really have ever done anything if the evil lord hadn't sent his men to fucking try and tear the statue down? Like... I mean, do you call on the Majin or do you provoke the Majin?
With the first two movies, it's provoke. With the third one, it's not.
Well, the third one kind of has a we'll get to it, but it kind of takes a different. The Majin has a different sort of presence in it. But yeah, I really get the sense that the Majin isn't. It's not a service. It's not like something that you can call on. It just. If it sees it, if you cross its path, or if it sees that balance has been ruptured, then it will wake up.
Right, and it doesn't really care for the prayers or the needs of the people there.
Yeah.
It's not like he really listened to them.
Yeah.
It's just.
Cause
he awoken when he was pissed off.
Yeah.
Not when it's like, oh, I guess I should care for these people that care about me.
Well, even at the end of the film, when the Majin is on his rampage through the town, it's like no one is really safe. Like, the protagonist is on a cross, and the Majin just walks up to him and just fucking like smashes it over because it's in his way.
Yeah.
He doesn't care about who the protagonist is. He's just trying to get to the one guy who's been rustling everybody's jimmies. And he only calls off his rampage after he sees the princess crying. It's like he had no idea. Like, it's sort of like a blind rage, almost.
Yeah, he definitely acts like a god in the sense that you can definitely tell that he perceives himself better, more important, and stronger than all of these tiny little ants. I mean, that's what it is.
Not wrong.
He's a god.
Yeah.
Like, why should God care about the petty squabbles of mortals? And when he's angry, why should he discern which ones are unjust and which ones aren't?
It's a really interesting... The Majin obviously never talks, because that would be silly. He doesn't make it really...
No, he says hello in the last movie.
No,
he says, "Oh, I love you.
He says, Hogarth.
I love you, little boy.
That's not what he says, but...
I resurrect the one that died in a river."
I mean, he doesn't make any sort of noise at all, and there's really no way to really communicate with it, and...
He sounds like Coco the gorilla.
He sounds like Megilla Gorilla.
Megilla gorilla.
But he's like a... He really is sort of like... He's a god, but he really is sort of a monster, too. They treat him like a movie monster. It's not something you can communicate with, really. Like, maybe he'll hear your prayers and, like, maybe answer them, but after that, it's kind of like... It's all up to him. It's a movie monster that runs through the town and smashes it. And that's the other thing, is that every single... Especially in the first film, every single shot with the Majin in it is a fucking technical marvel for the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. There are a couple shots in the first... At the end of the first Daimajin film that, like, I don't know what is, like, a puppet and what's, like, a guy in a suit, and it's, like, it's all composited, like, beautifully. Like, look at, for example, King Kong vs. Godzilla, which was, like, only a couple years before this. The compositing in that movie is shit. Anytime there's, like, a crowd of people in front of the screen, like, running past the miniatures, they're all, like, tinted blue. Like,
right.
Because they're on, like, that blue screen set. There's none of that in this movie. Everything is, like, on point. Like, all the colors are, like, correct whenever they start mixing footage. And it's, like, it's really impressive.
It's really impressive, too, with, like, the transition from an immobile statue, which is gigantic and interacted with by humans.
Yeah.
It's set to scale.
Mm-hmm.
And then it starts moving.
Yeah,
and
when
it
the
looks
Majin
pretty much the same.
When the Majin first wakes up, you thought it was going to cut to, like, a different shot of the Majin actually getting up and moving, but no, it's like this wide shot with, like, the whole set in place with the characters, like, kind of in the foreground, and all of a sudden this thing just, like, starts moving, and it looks too real for the time.
Because it's amazing. I thought he was going to cut because it looked exactly the same as the prop that was set to scale.
Prop, yeah.
So I was pretty much in awe that they were able to make a suit that looks almost identical to the set to scale prop.
And what's cool,
obviously it's a dude in a suit.
Well, what's also cool about the Majin is that, like, you see the statue, like, several times throughout the film, and so you understand, like, you're like, oh, it's gonna be this big when it starts moving. But it's not an impossible size. Like, he's not Godzilla size. Like, he doesn't break square cube law. It's the Majin, something of that size could potentially, like, walk around and do shit. No problem. It's a realistic size for a living thing.
It's about as tall as, like, the school our high school. It's not...
He's like 20, 25.
Yeah.
Maybe 30 feet. It's not like
2.5 stories tall.
Yeah, he's not like a ridiculous size, which makes him kind of scary because, again, that's like, I mean, you look at Godzilla and you're like, he would collapse under his own weight. So you kind of have to suspend your disbelief. But yeah. But like the Majin, he's walking around and there's, like, not only is there a real sense of weight to him, but there's, like, a real sense of scale.
Right.
Too. It's not ridiculous. And it's creepy, too. It's creepy looking. I would call these horror films. They fit the bill. I don't think... A movie doesn't have to be scary to be considered a horror film.
Imagine if the Majin was as tall as Godzilla, but it was still in the Endo period. So, like...
That'd be kind of neat.
It's the shortest buildings. Like... The scale is so fucked because the buildings are the smallest.
Well, I mean, the scale's
things.
pretty fucked in the original Godzilla too, because Tokyo didn't really have any skyscrapers at the time that movie was made. So even then, it's like, but Godzilla is so small in that film compared to his recent incarnations, but it's still a little off. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, I don't think a movie has to be scary to be considered a horror film. I just think it has to exhibit certain elements. Like I said before, this film has this, like, veil of, like, really, really creepy, like, mysticism over it. Like, they're constantly talking about spirits and God and angry spirits and shit like that.
I'd say that the first one does a much better job because they have a priestess that is acting as like an envoy to the Majin.
Yeah. But,
so that speaks
yeah.
a lot to the mysticism and to like the spookier aspects of the overall story and folklore of the Majin. The second movie I don't think does that. It's the Majin's kind of, it exists and it has a little hobbit hole.
Well,
on
they still have those religious elements too. There's still like a town priest.
But I don't think it's executed in a way that is,
because they don't have to establish
like
him as
horror.
much. Yeah, well, and I mean, there's other elements too that carry over. Like, these movies are really, they're kind of creepy looking. They're really gray, and like, they're dark in a lot of places, and it's like they're kind of sapped of like they look really cold. Kinda. Like, I get like kind of like spooky, like haunted woods kind of vibes from a lot of especially a lot of like the woodland sets and stuff.
Yeah, the giant and tall forests in the first one are pretty haunting.
Mm-hmm. And then you have like Akira Ifukube's score, which is like when it's not like monster movie, like stompy monster music. Yeah, no, but like when it's just people like walking around in the woods, there's like this really ambient like woo, like Scooby-Doo kind of shit, and it's like, you know, it adds like, it's fantasy with a thin layer of horror kind of wrapped around it. So that's why I would say that it counts.
Again, I agree with the first one.
Yeah.
The second one, not so much. Maybe that's because I don't really like it. And
I
the
think,
third one, not at all.
I think I think that's just a difference in the direction between the three films, because they're all written by the same guy, but like I said, they're all directed by three different people, and I think the first one definitely is the strongest one.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to say, like, I'm not sure why it was a trilogy, because at the end of the day, all three movies kind of tell the same story, more or less, when you really break it down. But I don't dislike any of the three. There's ones that are certainly better, but none of them are bad films. So it's like, I'll allow them to exist.
I'd say a good 60% of the third one's not good.
Well, we'll get to that one.
Yeah.
Is that all we have to say about the first film?
I
mean, it's again, it's like this. The plots are so. The structure of each film is so similar that it's hard to talk about them individually and not as a whole, because they all use a lot of the same elements. Because even if they do have different directors, they still all carry that cold look, and they all have that same structure, and they all have the same music and stuff. So they're kind of homogenous in a way.
I think what we should be doing with each movie that we talk about, when we're finished talking with one movie, we should give a summary of our opinions to kind of like just have a solid thought.
Like a yes or like a no.
Yeah, sort of like the first Daimajin movie is a technical marvel with excellent composite, great scale of what this giant monster can do in like a village and the destruction that causes. It all feels super realistic and established in this world. It doesn't feel out of place.
Really good sets and costumes.
Really great sets.
But that carries over to all three. Mm-hmm. I love the look of like these older Japanese fantasy and horror films where they're all kind of like set in historical times, but it's all like sets, like it's all built for the film, and it has this really homemade feel to it. But like, not homemade, but like built from scratch feel to it that I really like. Especially when they like build entire woods, like woodland settings on a set. It always looks really neat to me, which is hard to do.
Mm-hmm. And I think with the story itself, it does a great job of telling a samurai, like,
yeah, it's like
political drama.
I wouldn't call it political, but it's like if you took the Majin out of it, you'd have a really strong samurai story.
Yeah.
Either way, it's not completely original, but I like the characters enough.
Yeah.
The villain is really evil, and like the main characters kind of have an interesting plight where they're living out in the woods and shit, and it's nice. It's a nice little story. with and without the giant fucking statue stomping on people.
Right.
It just makes it better. The second film, Return of Daimajin, directed by Kenji Misumi, whose name I recognize. It sounds familiar. Oh, he did a bunch of the Lone Wolf and Cub movies. Okay, cool. Neat. Sorry.
This is all gibberish to me, Joe.
You gotta watch Lone Wolf and Cub. Lone Wolf and Cub is badass.
I'm not into furry shit, Joe.
They're samurai films. They're awesome. Anyway,
that's where furries came from, though.
so what's the plot of the second film? The Majin has moved on to a new place. At the start of this film, his statue rests on an island off, like, pretty, not far offshore from a seaside village. And then who's the villain in this one again?
Some like drunk asshole.
No, it's an evil warlord who has conquered a village and he sets out to conquer the next one over, pretty much.
He's conquered the village, and there are refugees of said village that were able to escape, I guess.
Yeah, they're trying to fight for their freedom.
And then the main two characters, which is the lord of a neighboring village, and what is the woman? Is she a priestess?
She's like the... Oh, fuck, isn't she like the daughter of the priestess or something? We watched these, I swear.
There isn't a priestess, though. She doesn't have a mother. She has some sort of importance, but she has a close relationship with the lands that the Majin inhabits.
Fuck, we watched these. I know we did.
I don't know what her
her
job is, but she does serve as a caretaker to like the Majin Island.
Yeah.
Garnering a close relationship with it.
Yeah, and isn't the island is sacred? Not everybody.
It is sacred. Yeah.
But the the evildoers go to it anyway. And they fucking blow up the Majin.
Right.
Dynamite
in like the first
off.
10 minutes.
Yeah, first 10-15 minutes.
After establishing the villain, the hero, and the two heroes, and just that there is a Majin there.
Yeah. So the second film feels a lot like the first. The first two are the two... I think the third one is the one that really differs in its structure. But the second film is just kind of sort of the first one again with different characters.
Yeah.
And set under a more a tighter span of time.
Yeah, it kind of shoves a lot of plot in the movie.
Yeah.
And it feels slow. It feels really, really slow.
Yeah, I'm not as engaged in the main characters in this one as I was in the first one.
There are things that I like a lot. The fact that it's a riverside village with a bunch of miners and slaves, I think.
Yeah.
I think that is shown a lot better than kind of the conflict that the warlord has done in the first movie.
Yeah.
You kind of see the ramifications of what the warlord has been doing to this land and these people.
Yeah, because he's already done it to another.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot, and seeing like the Majin in its own spooky islands and
that's what I was going to say. The mysterious island is a really nice. It's a really nice addition.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like foggy and creepy and weird. Like in the first film, the Majin is like up in the mountains on the top of a waterfall, but in this one, he's like on a spooky island. You have to like take a boat to get there.
And the island's
like,
almost
really there.
Always in the distance of every seaside shot.
Yeah,
too.
I'm like the first film, like the presence of the Majin is always there. You always know where he is.
Right.
And they're always talking about him, and like the plot really, when it comes down to it, kind of revolves around destroying this idol.
Right.
That the village worships to kind of like kick them in the nuts.
Mm-hmm. So I do like those aspects, but the characters I don't really care. Old Danny Torres isn't a great protagonist. He's not super interesting. I think the woman, I think, is a very enjoyable character to watch, and seeing like her plight and her character.
Yeah, it's one of those really kind of like old-timey, like super theatrical Japanese performances,
right,
where it's like it's really like melodramatic and like played up.
Yeah, I think she does a really good job, and I like that character.
Yeah.
And then there's the old pervert that hits the gong to...
Why? He's not a pervert.
He looks like a pervert.
No, he just looks like an old man.
He hits a bell all day and he's alone. He's...
Not all day.
Yeah.
On certain occasions.
He just does that.
No, he doesn't.
He looks like an old pervert.
No, he's just an old... Leave him alone.
But he was my favorite character.
Even though he's on the screen for like 15 seconds.
Yeah, he dies like when the Majin dies. Yeah, they like shoot him when he tries to stop the bombs from blowing up the Majin.
You're right. Yep.
How do I remember this, Joe?
I don't know. It's been like how long?
You've
ago
seen
did
this
we
movie
watch this?
twice.
Yeah.
I've seen it once.
The first time was like 3 years ago. So.
I called him a pervert. I can remember his face and what happens to him.
How do we feel about the Majin attack at the end of this film?
It is so slow and kind of uninteresting to me.
I disagree with that. I think the one thing that really sets it apart is when he first wakes up and he fucking splits the
That's
sea.
the only good part.
I know, but it's one of those things where it's like you watch the first film and so you're like, all right, I feel like I know what this thing can do. And then as soon as it wakes up, it like Moses, it parts water to get to land, and it's like you're like, oh fuck, I didn't know you could do that. And again, it's also a really nice effect with really nice compositing, and it looks super cool for the time. And then he gets on land, and then it's kind of like more of the same, but it's still really cool looking.
Kind of. I think it looks a lot less impressive after that point. It looks like they blew their load on that.
I think it's all in the direction. Again, I find it hard to believe that each of these films had like smaller and smaller budgets, because
I'm not saying that. It's just like they did a super impressive scene, and then there's a scene where he knocks down a wall, and you can easily see like the seams of where it's supposed to fall down.
It's all in where the director put the camera and decided to show that. Because I mean, you could say that about any scene with miniatures if you shoot it at the wrong angle. But the problem is that a lot of these, tokusatsu directors are so talented at what they do, and they know where to put the camera so you don't see any of that.
But also with the composite of some of the scenes where he's destroying the building in the foreground with people, you can clearly see that he's in the distance, and then he swings his fist and it like lands in front of the thing rather than on it, which is what the first movie did a really excellent job of. It really seemed like he was interacting with the destruction, while in a lot of the scenes in the second one it felt like he was put there rather than he was there.
Yeah, I didn't really... I mean, there were a couple shots where I maybe sort of felt that way, but for the most part, I didn't really notice it.
You're wrong.
Okay, this is kind of an all-encompassing thing about all three films, but I really like how these movies use color. Because they're so gray and cold throughout, but then there's the, like, splash... They'll throw, like, a splash of, like, red in the sky, or, like, blue when he parts the sea. And it's like, it's very monochromatic.
Green on his face.
Yeah, or something like that. Or like, yeah, like he'll like light up green when he's like flying through the sky and showing up like when the spirit flies around. But weird little tangent to go on, but I forgot that I didn't mention that a little while ago. Was that I really like how these movies use color. Because when color does show up, it's like it's really unnatural.
Yeah. Because
you're not expecting it, and it looks like really sinister, like supernatural.
Yeah, it does a really good job at showing like a contrast of like this drab and depressing world, and then this godlike figure.
And then
manipulates it.
The mysticism of it, and like the violence of it too. Which again, the first film does the best, with the red sky in the back of the whole Daimajin attack.
It looks the best.
Really cool looking.
The third one is the most brutal though.
Okay, so we move on to the third one?
Do we have anything else to say about the second one? I'm not a huge fan of the second one. I think the plight of the characters isn't particularly interesting, nor are the characters themselves, and I'm not super impressed by the Majin scene at the end.
I think it's a lesser film, but only like just so. It's not like a giant leap down in quality. I don't know what it is about it, but I just think like the characters maybe aren't as good. They're not as engaging as they were in the first film. But I mean, for the most part, it gets props for continuing to be a serious fucking man in a suit movie. Like I could still take it seriously, and that's so rare, especially around this era of 60s kaiju stuff. That's so rare. And so,
can you give me some examples, Joe?
Of serious?
No,
non-serious.
Non-serious.
Literally anything else that came out after like 1954.
What's the worst Godzilla movie that came out during this time? Was it one that we watched?
Godzilla's Revenge was like 1968 or 9.
Ugh.
It's only a couple years later. I mean, right before this was King Kong versus Godzilla, which is pretty goofy, which I like a lot, but it's really goofy.
You watched that recently, like 2 years ago, for the first time, right?
King Kong. No, oh my god, that was like one of my favorite movies when I was a toddler.
Oh,
I had it on VHS.
Didn't you watch like King Kong 2?
King Kong Escapes?
Yeah.
No, I saw that movie when I was a kid also.
What was the kaiju movie or giant monster movie that you watched for the first time?
For the first time recently? It was probably Return of Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
Because it had been unlicensed over here for so
right.
long. Yeah, Daimajin 2. It's good.
Electric Boogaloo.
It's more of the same. It's not as It's not as impressive the second time around, especially because the movie itself just isn't as impressive as the first one.
Right.
But I still like it. Daimajin 3, which my Blu-ray says is named Daimajin Strikes Again, but that's just Return of Daimajin again. So I'm gonna go with the other official title, which is Wrath of Daimajin,
which is a much better title.
Way cooler. Directed by Kazuo Mori.
My favorite.
Looks like he did a bunch of Zatoichi films. Several of them.
Zucchini films?
Zatoichi, the Blind Swordsman? They made like 30 movies out of this.
Oh, yeah.
There's a box set
that
costs like $200.
I know what this is. I know what you're talking about.
I'm pretty sure I've told you about this.
The Blind Swordsman?
Yeah, he's a samurai and he's blind. They made 30 movies out of this.
How can he be a samurai if he's blind?
He meets Yojimbo in one movie.
The cereal?
No, what? Yojimbo what?
Yeah.
Wrath of Daimajin, directed by Kazuo Mori, is, I think, in many ways the weakest film of the trilogy, but in several others is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
In certain aspects of it. The main plot revolves around, what is it, 4 or 5?
It's 4 kids.
4 kids who are on a journey through the mountains to save their fathers from...
I don't think it's fathers.
No, it's fathers. It's one of their... It's the dude and his little brother definitely have a dad.
Yeah, they have a dad.
Yeah. Well, it's like men from their village who have been, are being forced to work in sulfur mines up in the mountains, basically, by an evil warlord. Again, an evil warlord.
Yeah, they want to save them from the smelly smells.
Yeah. So this movie kind of...
That's the whole plot.
This movie kind of takes a Stand By Me approach, in that it's sort of about like the journey of young boys through the mountains and...
Except most of them can't act.
No, that's the thing, is that there's like really old-timey Japanese acting from the 60s that we mentioned before that is really...
theatric.
It's really theatric, it's really melancholic, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch, and there's a lot to appreciate there. But then there's child acting from the 60s, which I have...
60s Japan.
Yeah,
too.
I just can't...
And already theatric.
I can't really take it all that seriously. It's not like the little brother in this film, I want to strangle him.
The problem with the little brother is that he's written horribly, he can't act, and he's also written to make mistakes to cause drama and problem.
Yeah.
Just because he's a kid rather than like being a source of his character.
He's just so fucking stubborn.
He's stubborn and stupid.
Yeah, and like part of me wants to be like, I can't bag on it as hard as the rest of the movie, because again, it's like little kids.
Well, they should have gotten someone a bit older.
Are like young kids. Yeah, but the story calls for young kids.
Yeah, but the other kids are serviceable. It's just the one kid that is too young.
The little brother doesn't seem like he needs to exist.
His sole purpose is to cause drama and problems.
I can't.
That is what he's written for.
Like, I might find the characters...
He fucking kills one of the kids. because he's weak and stupid.
I might find the characters of the second film to be a little less interesting than the first, but I would much rather watch them than have a movie with this little brother in it. I hate it. I hate him. It's just the one kid that sets it off for me. Like, again, like you said, it's like all the other kids are serviceable, but it's this one little brother character that just kind of like bogs the movie down several notches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's because the majority of the time that we're following these kids, which is almost the entirety, we don't get much of a look at the people they're trying to save.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely could have cut back to what the people at the sulfur mines were going through several more times than they already did. Because not only is it a really cool set that I would have liked to have seen more of, but it's also like you cut to these kids on the mountain eating rice cakes when really I'm more concerned about the dudes breaking their backs over boiling hot sulfur.
And not only that, we don't really... We know that we should dislike the bad guy because he's the bad guy, but that's about it.
Yeah, you never really get to see him. You never really get to meet him.
No.
The dude in charge of all the evil stuff, who, you know, he gets his at the end of the film still, but like I don't really know who he is. Like the villain you see the most in this film is the
hunters that
he's like the hunter
the
sent to try and get the kids to stop what they're doing.
And he dies halfway through the movie.
And he's got like a cool mustache, so it's like I think he's way more threatening just because I see more of him.
You almost said you liked a child murderer.
He was compelling. He was a mean dude chasing down some youngins.
We're gonna have to cancel this podcast, Joe.
We can't. We're too deep already.
In too deep.
Well, the one thing that I do like about this film is that the Majin is kind of like we've mentioned that his presence was sensed in the other two films, but in this one it's actually there throughout most of it in the form of this eagle.
It seems like he has a vested interest in the plight of these children.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. The previous movies didn't really establish his caring for mortals.
I don't know. I think it's one of those things about God is that he kind of works in mysterious ways. And it's like, even then, it's like you can say in the first film that, like, you know, the woods were part of the Majin's presence. Because, like, there's that scene where the kid is running through the woods and he's like, there's definitely, like, something spooky going on in there. So it's like, I think it's always implied that the Majin kind of has an eye on what's going on, but in this film, you kind of explicitly see it in the form of this eagle that flies over and goes, Mah! And he, like, gets his own shots and stuff.
The filthy forest boy from the first one?
Yeah, the filthy forest boy, who, by the way, was a much more enjoyable and better acted child character than any of the ones.
He was a lot better than all of them. I like that in a way, the presence of the eagle or hawk, whatever it is.
It's just an interesting idea that just builds on what I know about the Majin from the first two films. Every single film kind of adds a little thing where I'm kind of like, oh, he can do this too.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. IMDb lists the first two films as drama fantasies, but this one is just fantasy. Guess it's not as mature.
It's too funny.
It's not. It's really not though. It's
hilarious.
It's still got like that serious tone, and it's still really kind of cold. And
I had some laughs. I had some gaffs. I had some gigs. I had some gauze.
You had some cigs.
I got
out for some
cigs.
I like all the snow stuff in this film.
I like this setting a lot. It's just wasted on these kids for the majority of the time.
I mean, especially towards the end of the film, the image of like the Majin like walking through the snow and there's like a storm going on in front of him and it's kind of like hazy looking is really cool.
That's what's really done well is I think the final scenes.
Yeah.
I think the Majin stuff is better than the stuff in the second one, not the first one. Because I think, despite another problem that is with this movie is you don't see the entirety of this mining town.
Yeah.
So we don't really get a scope of the size of it or where things are, which is done really well with the first two movies.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the third one, when the Majin comes and starts to destroy everyone,
it's not really a town. It's more of just like a mining operation.
It's just a mining.
It's at like the top of a mountain.
Right, and we didn't really see any of it before.
Yeah,
so it's just like he's destroying things that we
haven't
really
seen yet. But in certain ways, you could argue that's sort of to the film's benefit, because it's like you're kind of following the Majin through this town, and you don't really know what he's gonna do next, because you're not really sure what sort of obstacle they're gonna throw at him that he's gonna fuck up. So like, I mean, on that level it kind of works, but again, at the same time, it's like, I don't really get a sense of like where he's headed.
Yeah, because he ended up at the one spot that we see all the time.
Yeah.
Which I thought that was the only place. But there's an entire
there's like
operation leading up to the sulfur mines.
Like almost fortress of... Yeah. There's cool shit, like he knocks down the wall and it like comes crumbling down and it looks really heavy. Like it's a cool effect. Stuff like that.
There's a really cool effect where he's like underneath a bridge or doorway. Like a giant walkway.
Yeah,
and he just
I know
rips it.
Yeah, it literally just pulls it out of the ground, and it's like this huge structure.
And it looks.
You're like, shit.
It looks really good.
Yeah.
It looks like he actually destroyed something that was tangible to these tiny people, not just to the Majin.
Also, great villain death. The first film and this one,
Stabbo.
I love how the villains get it. The second one, I don't remember how the Majin ends up killing the main villain. Do you remember? I don't remember.
He throws him like a baseball into a wall, and he blows up like a tomato.
I was I was like, does he blow up? I don't remember.
I genuinely don't remember.
In
how
the
he
first
dies.
film, the dude gets crucified. The Majin takes out the nail that he put into his head, and then stabs the warlord to a cross with it. Great death.
Yeah.
Amazing. It comes full circle. The dude gets it. In this one, the dude gets stabbed with the Majin and finally pulls out his knife that he's had for all 3 movies. Stabs the dude, and then he like melts in a vat of boiling sulfur. It's great.
Which he did to someone else before.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
we see like a...
Yeah, it comes full circle again.
It sees his comeuppance.
That's why I'm like, they blow up the Majin in the second film. Does the villain blow up at the end of that one? I feel like I would have remembered it if he blew up.
Okay, so it's...
What the fuck happened?
It's Drunky, right?
What?
It's the drunk guy. They were putting the woman on a pyre.
Is there like a synopsis that I could read? I doubt it.
I don't remember. Fuck.
This is bothering me so much.
The villain deaths are extremely memorable in the first and third one.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see kind of it come full circle in terms of like a stabber in the third one, like it is in the first one. To see it come back to that.
Yeah.
I think that's done really well. But I think the scale of the Majin and the destruction that he does is fairly brutal in the third one. There's a fair amount of blood.
Yeah.
And terror. You see true terror in these people.
These are tokusatsu films, but they're not for kids.
No.
They're really heavy on the drama. They're really low on the monster action, and they're really like high in the death toll at the end of each film. Yeah. They're very adult oriented.
And you see it too. It's not just like Godzilla blowing up a building and you don't really get a scope of how many people died.
You see a man get stabbed to a cross with a nail. You see his chest like a railroad spike.
You see the Majin step on people and crush them to death.
They're not...
And it's a close-up on the person that's dying. It's not like a close-up on like Godzilla stepping on someone.
Each film, I think, has like one instance of blood that is extremely effective.
There's, I think, 3. Daimajin 3.
What are the other 2? Well, I remember the in the first film the Majin bleeds before he wakes up, which is really cool. That's really cool. Really creepy. But I mean, like there's like there's a killing blow in each film that has an instance of blood that you're kind of waiting for it.
Like the
Each
guy
film.
exploding like a tomato in the second one.
No, I mean that's not what happened. I'll continue to believe it did until I rewatch this film 10 years from now. But it's a nice, and it's like 60s blood too. It's like really saturated and like vibrant.
Yeah,
against,
it's very
against
vibrant.
really monochromatic gray backgrounds, and you're like,
It looks like
got it.
thinned paint.
Yeah, yeah.
That's about it.
Pretty much what it is. So Return of Daimajin is like, or excuse me, Wrath of Daimajin.
Wrath of Daimajin Strikes Again.
No. Wrath of Daimajin is a solid film that is bogged down by almost heinous child characters.
I'd rather watch the third one though than the second one.
Oh yeah, I think it's just because the third one does more new stuff that keeps it more interesting to me. The second one, you could definitely argue is a better film. That's the thing, is that there's 3 different directors, but it's such a cohesive trilogy because they all came out in 1966, so it's not like they were made years apart, and they're all clearly using the same crew.
If you
for each film
had told me that it was different directors, I doubt I would have noticed.
Really?
No, I mean maybe with the second one, but like all of the Daimajin stuff and the sets themselves, it all looks.
It's so good in the first film.
It all looks great.
It's so, the first film is like top tier, good 60s.
Yeah.
Like shit. It's amazing. And then the next 2 are kind of like, yeah, still good, but I'm kind of like, eh. But the first film is like,
there he is.
Yeah, it's like, damn, dude.
There's his face.
I would love to get the posters for each 3 of these films and like frame them in my house. Can you imagine having like all 3 of these?
Cool.
Yeah, that'd be. They're slick. They're nice.
It kind of looks like. Did you ever? There was a game that came out this year called like.
Neo 2.
No, not Neo 2. Is that coming out this year? I don't think it is.
I didn't even know it was announced.
Yeah, I know.
I doubt it.
It was called like Annihilation or something, or Extinction. You play like this tiny man and you try to destroy giant monsters, like really giant monsters.
Shadow of the Colossus.
No,
this is
but bad.
I haven't heard of this.
I know.
What the hell is
it's like
this?
It's like some.
Is this an indie game?
Some Slav developer.
Oh. some CD Projekt Red?
No, they're good. They're Poles.
Yeah, close enough.
But that poster looked like the poster for that shitty game.
I kind of want to know what this game is.
It's supposed to be bad.
I know, but I still kind of want to know.
Some shitty self-published shit.
Daimajin is a solid trilogy.
It is.
If you don't want to sit through 3 films that are relatively similar, you could watch the first film and still have your mind blown.
And still not have to watch the other ones.
Because
you don't need to watch the other ones.
They're all good movies. The first one is a damn good movie, though. I've seen the first one like 4 times, I think. The other ones I've seen like twice.
Okay.
So like I love the first film. The other 2 I like, but the first one is really great.
Mm-hmm.
There is like a Blu-ray set of these that came out a few years ago that you could buy, but it goes for like $60 now. I bought it when it was 10. This was $10 when I bought it. So
all right.
It's worth it if you like old Japanese monster movies. Excuse me, films. Monster films. Films. But
not like the trash we've talked about before.
Well, that's the thing, is like people don't ever talk about these movies. Like I'm a nerd and I frequent a lot of like Godzilla forums and shit. and like nobody ever really talks about Daimajin. I feel like it's kind of like a forgotten thing, but they're not unavailable. They're not hard. It's not hard to obtain. So it's, I don't know why.
I mean, you have a Region 1 Blu-ray?
Yeah, this is like a trilogy from whoever owns the rights to all the Gamera movies right now. Release that.
Okay.
So
then,
like
yeah.
it's not obscure. People just don't bother to watch them or something. I don't know what it is, but if you like historical dramas about Japan and you like horror movies from Japan, or you like giant monster movies from Japan, this kind of meshes everything into one.
Joe, I think we're gonna have to scrap this episode because I still don't think it's a horror movie.
it on the bare minimum
This
level.
is never gonna surface.
On the
now.
bare minimum level, these count to me as a horror movie only for the insane mysticism that they just bleed.
Remember the part when that kid is flown down the river in the third movie and he's just dead and he doesn't come back to life?
I was scared. I had nightmares.
The Daimajin resurrects 2 of the dead kids, but he doesn't get that one.
Grimbus, I was terrified. Alright. It's probably gonna be a while before the next episode is out, so considering I'm leaving for school in 2 days.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd get 5 episodes in.
We can get the Hideshi Hino theater.
Yeah, I was hoping that we could get
Yeah,
this
me
done.
too. I just, it was short notice, so.
Yeah, it was.
It was, yeah. It was not any less of a surprise to me, so. So yeah, join us again in December.
Take me back to December.
Yeah, wake me up when December starts. Haha.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Griffin.
I'm Joe. Good riddance.
This is Saeki House.
Fuckers.